Welcome to the War on DadBods podcast. I'm here with Stephen Spence today. I'm really excited about this podcast. I hope you guys are going for a walk while you're listening to it. Today, Stephen has done something I've never seen anybody do before. So there's this workhorse corporate mentality where when people work for these corporations, I've noticed from the outside in that they tend to work a lot of long hours, and those that make the most sacrifice sometimes get promoted, and that's the culture. Well, Stephen has managed to work 42 hours a week as a senior executive in corporate management for Fortune 500, for multiple Fortune 500 companies. So today we're going to dig into how he does it. And he's like the corporate coach, guys. Definitely check this out. Stephen, welcome to the podcast. Thanks for being here.
Thanks, Matt. Good to be here. One quick correction, senior manager, not senior executive.
Okay, senior manager. See, I don't know the corporate world at all. Appreciate
Yeah, all good.
it. Let's kind of start off with like your bio, your quick story, like what got you into this career, and tell us your recent history and the challenges you've overcome.
Yeah, absolutely. So, getting into coaching, my real trigger for doing that was in 2016. I went through some very severe burnout. I was working an uncounted a number of hours. I wasn't paying attention to my health, and there was just a lot of negativity in my life, and I wasn't doing anything about it. I was just rolling with the punches, expecting everything that was normal. That was the way things were expected. And I had three events that were really my wake-up calls to change the way I live, and then also that drove me to do what I do today. The first one is I was having a lot of panic attacks and anxiety, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. So I'm like, okay, go to the doctor, go to the doctor. That's the thing to do. My wife took me to the doctor, went to the doctor. After talking to him, they're like, yep, we need to put you on these five different medications. I'm like, no, not doing that. So, all right. Thing one is like getting on meds that have massive number of side effects. I mean, SSRIs, all this stuff. It's like, no, not gonna go do this. There's got to be a better way to do this. Now, did I do a better way? No. I just said, no, I'm not going to do it. Number two was I was working with one of our large clients, just sitting in a war room. We were really focused on a problem and a large project that was going on. Everybody's stressed, everybody's working a lot of hours. It's just go, 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 go. And one of the colleagues that was sitting next to me just sat there and goes, my head hurts. I'm like, okay, yeah, well, all our heads hurt. It's stressful. We got a lot going on. So I'm gonna call my wife. Calls his wife. His wife was actually an ER nurse, and she recognized the signs, immediately took him to the hospital. He actually had like a brain aneurysm or something similar like that while he was sitting in the office. Luckily, they caught it early enough. He's fine now, but it was like, wow, that's a lot of pressure for somebody while they're working just to be like, the third thing that really drove me is I was driving to the office one morning, and as I was going there, I don't know if you've ever heard this, and someone actually told me the name, and I forgot what it was called. But when you hear hospital patients where they can see and hear everything around them, but they can't do anything, they can't move or anything like that. I had that luckily I was stopped at a stoplight. I had that. It was such a severe panic attack. I couldn't move, couldn't do anything. I could see and hear everything going on around me. And, it might have lasted for like a second, but for me, it felt like forever. And I felt paralyzed. And that was like the third straw that broke the camel's back, so to speak, that really said, I've got to change things. So, I talked to my wife, really started making changes in my own personal life as well as corporate. The biggest thing for me is that I started saying to my managers, the people I work with, I said, I've got two phones. One is a personal phone, one is a work phone. At 5 o'clock at the end of the day, this phone goes into a bucket and I don't touch it till the next day at 8 a.m. That was a boundary that I needed to set. And I said, there are three people who have this personal phone number. And if it's absolutely necessary, they can call me and get a hold of me over here. Now, it was interesting. I had a lot of people say, that's a fabulous idea. Why didn't I think of it? Because a lot of people are thinking, how do they set boundaries? Because nobody really taught us as kids. I mean, yeah, playing in the sandbox, that's my toy, that's your toy, things like that. But as we grow up and become adults, nobody tells us what is a healthy boundary. So everybody just keeps asking for more and more and more. And if you're a type A personality or anybody who likes to help others, it's easy to fall into this trap of Oh, well, it's just one more thing. I'll do one more thing. I'll do one more thing. And suddenly you go, oh man, I've got thousands of things that people have asked me to do that I didn't say no towards.
Very
So I did
popular.
that. Go ahead.
Yeah, see it a lot.
Yeah. So I did that. I started like working more healthy hours. Like when I'm done, I'm done. Obviously, if there's an escalation that's ongoing, I take care of the business. It needs to be taken care of. I'm not going to slack off at work. But I figured out what were the priority things and what did I actually need to do versus delegation and giving other things to people to do. I wasn't trying to hold it on anymore. The other part is I signed up for a half Ironman, dropped like 45 pounds or so. I got to the lowest weight I've ever been in that I can remember
Yeah.
while I was training. Now, it was a lot of training, and I don't know if I'd do it again, at least not for a while, but I was training like constantly, and I dropped a bunch of weight, but I really accomplished it. I finished a half Ironman. I did everything, never done one before, and I just did a half Ironman in Arizona in 2017. So then I started really, through that process, started realizing the types of foods I was eating and how to take better care of myself physically and mentally. But all of that was triggered off of that extreme stress and those things that really brought me to that point. Now, fast forward a couple of years, I stepped back into management because at the time I was just a leader, but not a manager. And I said, I'm going to treat my employees the way I thought somebody I wish would have told me. Now, nobody asked me to do all the extra work. I did that all on my own. But nobody also told me, it's like, you don't have to. That was the thing that I was missing. So now with my team of about 40 that I manage on top of my coaching business, I say, hey, you need to take care of your kids. You need to take care of your family. Always focus on what's number one because everything else will fall into place. And that's how I work with my team. And I make sure their well-being is the top of mind at all times.
So how has well, two things here that I think are really interesting. No, number one is, you got to a point, you made the changes. The logistics of the changes we're definitely going to talk about and how to make them and all of that. But when you made the changes and now you're working so many less hours and now you have this space. I just want to highlight that with that space, you could do a lot of different things. You went into Ironman, you went into cleaning up your diet, you went into all of that. And that's, what you were craving to do with that space. And people could do a variety of things when they create that space. They could spend more time with their family. They could, take on any habit or whatever it is. That's really awesome. The second thing is, so once you began to manage your team in this new, different approach that is holistic and I think fair and responsible and very logical and holistic, how did that affect their productivity and their performance?
Great question. A lot of them, many of them are already super high performers. So if anything, it was a little bit of a shock to them because they had expected, well, everybody's going to make sure I work all the time. It's like, no, not necessarily. That's not going to be the case. If you want to work more, absolutely, I won't stop you, but consider what it means to you, to your family, to your relationships, to the things that are matter and are important to you. But honestly, I see a lot of my people performing very well. They're asking for higher levels of responsibilities and they can focus on the things they want to go do. I'm like, hey, if you finish your work in a decent amount of time, you got some extra, go teach yourself something, go learn something, go take care of yourself, walk around the block, do something like that. Those types of things that took me a while to learn because I didn't have a coach. I didn't know what to do. I just kind of figured a lot of it out on my own. So now I'm like, great, I'm going to tell people that it's okay to do these things. You need to go pick up your kid at 4. Sure, go ahead and do it. I don't care. You've worked the time you needed to do. As long as you get in and complete the work you need to do, great. If you want to take on more, sure. You want to rise in the ranks, that's perfectly fine. But a lot of it, I see people performing at a very high level when they are not too stressed and they are able to really think clearly about what they're doing.
I think that's what I would expect. I've not witnessed it the way you have, but that's what I would expect is when the nervous system isn't so overwhelmed and so burnt up and so fried that you would make much better decisions or probably just make less bad decisions,
Mhm.
which, can cost us lots of time, money, and damage relationships if there's, anger or stress involved. And so how many hours a week are you currently working?
I try and stick to right around 42. I try. obviously there are exceptions to that, like anything, where it's like, hey, this really needs to get done, but then I choose. This is the biggest thing is that I choose that, okay, I'm going to do that. I choose that I'm going to give up my lunch break for this, or I choose that I'm going to work extra hours. It wasn't a default mode anymore. It was that I'm making a conscious choice that I am replacing this with this because it's something I want, not what I thought people expected of me. And that was the biggest difference for me is that I had all these stories in my head that's like, oh, people expect me to do this. They expect me to be here. They expect me to do this. They expect me to be there. It was all in my head. And as soon as I got out of my own head and figured out, well, no, if they expect something of me, they're going to tell me. And then I
Yeah.
have a clear reality of what things are instead of all the stories I was telling in my own head, which drove me to that point.
So some of us have assumed expectations. We're assuming people are expecting things from us that they may or may not be expecting they haven't been clearly communicated beforehand. That's interesting. Um, so part of getting there, the process of getting there. I mean, we got people listening. They're like, yeah, but I can't do that because I got this, because I got that. What are some of the tools, some of the tactics, some of the shifting beliefs? That's
Mhm. Yeah, the biggest thing is like you are the only one who can set boundaries. No one's going to do it for you. You have to go do it, and you have to do it based on what's valuable to you. I know some people use like the Eisenhower matrix. I don't know if you're familiar with that, like what's
Mhm.
important, time bound, all that stuff. I've started changing that into a value-based matrix where I say, what is valuable to me? And then how much time does it take? The things that are not valuable to me, but as a lower priority. Now, yeah, I've got to take out the garbage. I've got to clean the house. I've got to do the yard. Those are like the things that have to get done that I might not find a lot of value in. But the things that you can choose to do, that's where your value comes in. So I use that a lot to determine, okay, is this valuable to me, the future I want, and the goals that I'm trying to pursue? If not, do I absolutely have to do it? And that's the hard part I think people have to get over in their own mind is like, do I absolutely have to do it? Or can somebody else do it? Or does it even really need to be done in the first place? We get so stuck in our ways of like, oh, well, I've always done this. Like, have you ever asked why? So that's the value thing I use to try and determine what is the value to me, not as what is the value to somebody else, and then prioritize what I do based on that. Now, I want to support my family, so I do my work because that's valuable, things like that. But also, like, my health is valuable, so I exercise and I meditate and I listen to motivational things because I prioritize those. And when I prioritize them, I make time for them because I'm the only person who can choose what I spend my time on.
There you go. I think one of the biggest challenges people have is just saying no.
Mhm.
What was that like for you starting to say no to things, just the way you approach the conversation, way you frame it in your head?
It was so scary. I will say the initial time when I was starting to like, okay, I'm going to start doing this, it was so scary, but I considered the alternative. I reminded myself of those things of my life, of like somebody having an aneurysm, having to take medications that I know I might never have to get off of, and being stuck in a situation that I had no way out of. And I kept reminding myself as well, which is scarier, that or the possibility of someone having a negative reaction. So
mm,
that's one. The other part is remembering that after words come out of my mouth and after behaviors have taken place, I have no control over what somebody else does with that. So control the controllables. I have control over how I behave, what I say, but after that, I have no more control.
yeah, and in a previous conversation, you mentioned no is a complete sentence. Uh,
Absolutely. No is a complete sentence. You don't have to give an explanation. And that's something I still struggle with today, but I've learned more on it that you have the choice to give an explanation or not. Like if you feel somebody warrants an explanation, that's your choice. But no is also an answer. It's like, can you work late? Do you want to? Is it part of your job responsibility? That's the other key because there are job responsibilities. There are jobs where you're on call. It's part of what you signed as a responsibility. Yeah, you have to do some of those things. But other than that, it's like you make the choice if you want to do that or not. Because no is a complete answer. Like, nope, not going to be able to do that today. If they ask for more, it is your choice as to whether you give them more details or not. Depends on the relationships, things like that, but ultimately it is your choice as to how much detail, and no is a complete answer.
how about how about this one? Okay. So we've gotten as far as to start saying no. We've gotten as far as to establish our boundaries. And
Mhm.
now at some point, inevitably, people will test our boundaries and cross our lines. Um, what happens then?
Honest conversations. That is the most important thing. Be transparent, have an honest conversation with the person who's doing it. It might have been a mistake. It might have been something they've forgotten. Give the people the benefit of the doubt and go have the conversation with them. Like, hey, say for example, it's like, hey, I see you scheduled a meeting at 5 p.m. I typically get off at this. I accepted it because of XYZ reason. Again, going back to the choices of that aspect. But normally I do this. So you reestablish those boundaries and make sure that they're understood. If it crosses again, then you say, hey, going forward, I won't be accepting your meetings. I won't be responding to you unless absolutely necessary. That's where you have to go to protect yourself. And possibly if it's in a corporate setting, you might need to go to their leadership and be like, hey, I've tried to have the conversation first. The person doesn't seem to be picking this up. I'm looking for your support to help in this area. And there are unfortunate situations because of the way some corporations work that even their leaders should be like, well, you should just do it anyway. Then you have your own personal choice to determine, is that an work environment you want to stay in? And are you going to thrive there? And
Mm,
that's probably a hard thing for a lot of people because
yeah.
people think change is scary and they think I can't get anything else. Maybe that is the opportunity or the trigger to start improving skills, to working on the different things if you truly consider your own well-being.
Yeah. And what I've gathered, and I haven't lived in that environment, but in my personal life and in some of my business life, I find there's standing between me and sort of the life I want or a change I want is often a very important one conversation, you
Mm.
know? And there's different times that this happens, but that one conversation, just having it appropriately, accurately, clearly, um, it can change so much. But a lot of us, there's a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear about entering those conversations. But I mean, after you've had those conversations, how have they gone based on how you expected them to go?
My initial expectation was like, oh man, they're going to get mad at me. They're going to go off on me. And what I tried to think about is like, what would I do if someone came to me with this? How would I respond? I'm probably not going to get mad at them. I'm probably not going to yell at them. I'm probably going to try and understand better. So then I start reframing it like, how would I respond to me if I was going there? Okay, I'm going to adjust my expectations. Now, the interesting thing is some of these boundary expectations, people were very receptive, like, oh, that makes sense. I wonder why I didn't think about it. So it was even a more surprising response than I had expected. And sometimes it is just that honest and transparent conversation around setting boundaries to begin with and recommunicating those boundaries. Because as time passes, people get busy, they forget. And it's just like, hey, gentle reminder, I don't, I've got things in the afternoon I take care of. I start my day at this, all those different things. And making sure that you just remind people of your boundaries. Some people forget it. We're human, it happens. And just giving grace where grace is due.
Yeah, and it's just having the one conversation and then the follow-ups and checking in. But that one shift, that one change can open up so much time, so much freedom, so much mental stress. It can just
Hmm.
relieve that. And it's just about having that conversation. So if you're listening right now, I want to challenge you and I want you to think about something. If you were to have a conversation, who would it be with? And what's the first conversation you have? What would it be about? Well, Stephen, let's ask you, like, I don't know, big picture. Can you think of like where people should start with which conversation with who? I mean, anything come to mind there?
You need to have a conversation with yourself first.
Mm.
It kind of sounds very like, coachy type of thing, but
Yeah.
honestly, until you determine what are your own boundaries and what are your values and what do you think is important, any boundary you go and set with another person can become hollow very quickly unless you really have determined within yourself what is an important way. Why is this boundary important to me? And what would I be willing to do to reinforce that boundary? That makes your stance on that a lot easier to go have that conversation with your manager, with the coworker who always comes by your desk and won't stop talking, with possibly your spouse, or even your older kids or your younger kids. Now, the younger kids might not understand, but it's a good opportunity to show them as well what is a healthy boundary.
Now, do we just walk up to people and start having this conversation? Or do we maybe said, at this time, can we discuss XYZ? Uh,
Hmm.
any terminology or phraseology that you like along that? I want to toss this in. When asking for like a raise, I was talking to somebody earlier. Like one question that I really like because I have a mentor here that was a corporate guy. He says, if you're asking for a raise, just ask him like, so what's our process for getting promoted? And what metrics are we using? That's just the
Hmm.
phrase that I like. Like, what is our process for getting instead of just asking for a raise?
Hmm. Yeah, so entering in some of these conversations, you can start off with, "Hey, I just want to hop on a call real quick and make sure we're on the same page regarding how we're working together." Then you go and show that not only are you just wanting to tell them what you think, but you're willing to make sure you're on the same wavelengths for how you're going to work together, because they might also have a very different expectation than you do. So it creates an open dialogue between the two of you to really say, what's your view? What's my view? How do these two work together? And this is why it's important beforehand to understand what would you be willing to do to keep your boundary. When you have that solid, and let's say, for example, they say, you know what? Yeah, I'd be willing to work till 5:15, but not anything past that. Like, you know what? I have these meetings that always go towards the end of the day five that run over. Are you still okay with that? This is one example of those types of conversations, but it's making sure that it's open. It's not like, hey, I'm going to tell you what my boundaries are and I want you to listen. It probably is not going to go off that well, but hey, I'd like to make sure we're on the same page with how we're working together going forward and see if we're on the same page. Creates an open space where there is dialogue.
Yeah, and then listening back to them and understanding, what the needs are, like what they need from you most specifically, and maybe what's not so important, and constantly checking in and getting clarity on what the priorities are.
Absolutely.
Um, Strictly based off your personal experience, what have you observed? Is there anything that might not be common knowledge?
Badge is not, or stress is not a badge of honor. That's one thing that I've seen a lot. I've read a lot about is that people think, if I'm busy, if I'm stressed, that's a good thing. That's how I get ahead in life. And actually, it's quite the opposite. It will probably bring you down towards the end of your life because of the detrimental effect stress has on your well-being, on your mental and your physical health, and your longevity as well. That's one thing that I think people think if I push hard enough, everything's going to work out right in the end. Not necessarily. So that's one I think is like people probably a lot in the corporate world think just if I push just a little bit more, it'll get better. That's not always true.
And one phrase I hear a lot that I get triggered by is and I think a lot of us do this in a lot of different areas of our life is I'll be happy when or as soon as I get here then. And it's like, no, you need to be happy now. You need to
Hmm.
enjoy this life now. You need to get because that thing always gets pushed. I mean, everyone's got this in their head. Remember how you said you were going to get in shape when? Remember how you said you were going to do something special with your relationship after this? We just have to get through this, or once I get to that point. We need to shorten the timeline on that a lot more and really live our lives.
Absolutely. 100%. Tomorrow never comes. That's the interesting thing. Because by the time it's here, it's today, right? So it
Mhm.
never actually comes. So yeah, setting those things and really being like, are you happy with where you are now? Okay. What steps and actions are you going to take to get to there? And what's your timeline behind that? A date.
Yeah, I think we probably touched on this, but I wanted to ask you about the unconventional stuff, the unexpected results. Um, I think we touched on that a little bit. I did want to ask about you're a high performer. You're very focused. You're a certified performance coach. Um, and this is a health podcast. I'm trying to get the guys in as good a shape as they can possibly get in. Tell me about your breakfast routine, your breakfast smoothie, your breakfast meal. Like, how do you get set up and energized for the day?
Absolutely. So routine wise, wake up. And yes, I do start off with coffee in the morning just to wake myself up for the most part, but I usually wake up around 4:30 or 5. and I kind of get myself ready for a few minutes. But while I'm doing that, I will listen to motivational podcasts. I've got a few people that I listen to. There's like two specific ones that I will almost listen to on repeat that just really give me what I like to call the tingles. It just energizes me. It makes me feel like, all right, I'm ready to go. And which seems counterintuitive to the next thing, because usually the next thing is I now will go and meditate for 10 to 30 minutes, depending on what time I wake up. And I'll spend that time just relaxing and getting focused. And then after I've gone and really like cleared out how I feel and prepared what I feel like has really prepared myself for the day. And it varies the type of meditation that I do. Sometimes I'll just like breathing. Sometimes I'll focus on a specific thought that I have. So focus meditation. And sometimes I'll use like Vipassana meditation where it's the body point focus type thing. I'll do that for the
So
10 to,
sorry,
yes.
but so the meditation, not guided, no music.
Usually not. And this it's one way for other people. I give guided meditations, but I don't do them so much because usually I find myself focusing too much on what the person is saying rather than letting it just be experienced for me. I know for some people, especially when they're starting out, can be helpful like, okay, now focus on this. Now do the body scan, focus on your toes and all the way up and all the way down. So they need that kind of guided so they don't get stuck in their own mind. And it gives them something else to focus on rather than the thoughts in their own head.
Yeah, and I mean, my vote is whatever is easiest for you to access, that's where you start, right?
Absolutely. There's
Um,
no right way to do it.
I certainly want to get into the rest of this morning routine. You mentioned there's two podcasts you put on repeat that gets you going and tingling.
Mhm.
Which two?
Yeah, Motiversity is one. Um, and then also Eddie Pinero is another one that I like listening to. He has a mixture of like motivational quotes and ideas, but also he has music that is very well like aligned to what he's saying. So like almost like emotionally guides you through like conquering something or doing something. So it's like very invigorating. But Motiversity is a big one. There's actually a specific one from Tony Robbins that I listens to where he talks about, everybody encounters extreme stress in your life, but it's a matter of how do you react to that stress? And he kind of goes into that and the thought about the power of choice and things like that. There's also the other specific one is one that's a combination of like Matthew McConaughey, Les Brown, um,
Mm,
Jordan Peterson, and a bunch of people compilation together, and it just very seamlessly works through just just very motivational type stuff.
nice. Yeah, I hadn't listened much to Les Brown, and I had a client where we were working out, and he's like, Matt, put on Les Brown YouTube, and man, I had to stop and like take notes from my morning workout class because like there were some good quotable things I had to get in there. So I mean, Les Brown got me recently.
Yeah, he is really good, super powerful.
So, all right, let's get back into this morning routine. Coffee, meditation,
Yep. And
4:30,
then
5 a.m.
Yep. And then after that, if it's light enough, I'll either try and go for a quick hike or a run, or I'll take Champ, our dog, out with us for a quick hike. That's when it's light enough in the morning because I also start at 7 a.m. for my work. Or I'll cycle indoors to get a good exercise in on that. Once I'm done with everything, then either my wife's going to make my breakfast or I'll make my breakfast depending on what she's got going on for the day. But it's like 2 eggs, 2 scoops of lean bacon, 100 grams of egg whites, just cooked in olive oil on a pan with a little bit of seasoning, salt, pepper, and a little bit of garlic powder. So that is the protein aspect of the breakfast. Then the smoothie. So the smoothie is mixed dark berries, 8 ounces of orange juice, turmeric, um, ginger, hemp hearts, acai, and uh, maca powder. And then I also take 1 tablespoon of chia seeds and this green blend mixture that's like kale and a bunch of other stuff mixed into this green mixture. Pour it in, just blend it up, and I have those two things for my breakfast. Oh, and then beet powder.
Wow, wow. So you're getting your high protein and you're getting your nutrient density, and I like the dark, but a lot of good stuff in there for brain function and
And
satiate.
that's the thing. A lot of people they focus so much on it's gonna sound weird, physical performance, like, okay, I gotta have protein, I gotta have carb to fuel my run. It's like, well, yeah, how are you fueling your brain or helping your brain recover from free radicals and all these other things that you people don't focus on. They think about, oh, gotta have enough protein to grow muscles, or I gotta have enough carbs to do that run, or I've gotta have enough fats for, so fat is an issue. One helps with brain as well. So all these low fat diets, you actually might be hurting yourself in the end.
Yeah. We were talking about um all right, so after breakfast, then it's off to work.
Yeah, after breakfast is usually just like, so I work remote, so I don't have to go anywhere for work anymore. So I just come into the office and start it at 7.
All right, here's a curveball. All right, let's say busy day. Now it's lunchtime. It's hungry. You have to eat something. You're in a hurry. What is your go-to quick grab meal? Or if you got Uber Eats or something, I mean, like, how do you solve that problem if you find yourself unprepared, which sounds pretty rare for you?
Yeah, usually it's not. It's always something. So usually have something healthy that I can quickly, sometimes so I eat 5 times a day.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so I'll have breakfast and then a snack one, which is usually nuts. So I'll have like mixed nuts with almonds and cashews and things like that. And then I'll have a lunch, which is a mixture of like it's low carb tortillas and things like that. And but if I am ever looking for something, I'll try and switch around one of my snacks. Like, all right, I can go grab my apple for lunch, and then I'll switch the other one over. So I always have something that can rotate through and make alternate.
Nice. I like it. And so 5 times a day means you've really got between the meditation, the morning exercise, the breakfast, and the clean food multiple times a day. I mean, your energy is level and
Mhm.
stable, and your sleep is good. And so you're psychologically optimized. It's a nice program. I like it. We were discussing the other day, the question about it. Is there anything you do with your relationship that might deviate from the norm or seem unusual? And I was sharing how me and my wife have had separate bedrooms.
Mhm.
It's worked out just fine for us.
Hmm. Yeah, so don't do the separate bedroom thing, but we have separate beds, mostly because I move around a lot at night and then she doesn't get to sleep as well. So in order for us to, sleep well and consider the well-being of, our mental well-being with getting enough rest, we have that. We're not far apart, but enough that like we don't disturb each other's actual sleep.
Yeah, and like I just think about like the math of sleep. Like I've got my Aura ring, and I can check my daily, weekly, monthly, and yearly how much time I sleep per night. And over the last 4 years, on average, I've slept an extra 5 or 10 minutes every night on average over the last few years. So like I was getting 6 hours and 30 minutes. Now I'm getting like 7 hours and 15 minutes. And if you got a partner in your bed and every night it's 5 minutes, they're sick, you're sick, temperature schedules are different, like it just
Mhm.
sleep is so important. And I just want people to be open to that option. I realize some people are wired in a way where that's never an option for them, and I totally understand. But I want to normalize that option not being
Mhm.
that strange to not seem like
Yeah.
the human being that's constantly waking you up.
Yeah, it's to each their own, right? It's whatever works and solves the sleep conundrum. And I'll say conundrum because for some people it is a tough one to go and figure out, but choose what works best for you. And if it's like sleeping in separate beds, sleeping in separate rooms, it's like find other ways to spend time together then if that's the concern. And then you start questions like, okay, if I'm feeling the need to do that, now sometimes there's cuddling and things like that, but there's opportunity for that, but not you're not going to do that while you're sleeping though. Like I think a lot of us get customized to the movies of like you see videos of these couples they're like sleeping next to each other or like the NyQuil advertisements where they're sleeping right next to each other. Like how many people actually do that?
Like
Probably
peaceful.
not that. Right. Yeah, exactly. And that's a really important thing is like if you don't get the proper amount of sleep, I mean, there's been studies shown in the military when you take people and decrease their level of sleep to a certain level, they perform horribly. I mean, horribly. I mean, I can't even remember. It was like 60% decrease in like performance or something. It was a ridiculous number.
Yeah, there seems to be I know Elon Musk definitely talks about like 6 hours is where like he noticed his personal productivity will shift. And if he's less than six, he's better off just sleeping with that time because of the mistakes and the productivity costs from not sleeping.
Yeah.
And
Sleep is important.
I think you asked an interesting question the other day. We were chatting about this, and you were like, "Man, how much when you don't sleep next to each other, like maybe it's because, or like if you feel the need to have to sleep next to each other, maybe ask the question, how much time do we really spend together when we're awake?
hmm
So do you spend enough time together when you're awake? I just want people to think about that for a second. And if you were to spend more time, what might that look like for the listeners?
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Moving on here. In the last year, is there anything that you have changed your mind about?
Mm, last year is something that I've changed my mind about. Um, I think the biggest thing is, and a lot of this came from things I learned at Performance Coach University, was like I have more control over my mood and my state than anything else. So I'm a huge proponent of state management, and one of the things I've learned about not only using it on myself, but teaching it to other people and really getting it to a point that I can help people get into a certain state is that the external environment can only affect your state if you let it. And I have so much more control over my mood and my state when I recognize that I had control over it.
Can you walk us through an example of how you behaved before and now how you would do things differently?
Absolutely. So before I get on a meeting and I would be super reactive because either I was anticipating how the meeting was going to go or the meeting afterwards, I'm still kind of revving from the interaction because maybe it wasn't positive. In the past, I would just let that continue to fester in my mind, like, oh, I've done something wrong, or get anxiety and panicking, like, oh, should I have done something different? And then the rest of my meetings kind of get shot from there because it's like I'm no longer focused on what I'm doing at the time. I'm focused on the meeting that already occurred, which goes back to like what I like to call mental time. And mental time is where even though the meeting only lasted for 30 minutes, I still spent another 2 hours thinking about that. That's the mental time versus the physical time. So I'm really big on saying, great, yeah, you only had a 30-minute meeting, but how much mental time was that meeting?
Yeah.
So that's what I did before. But now when I have that, I go, okay, what do I want to feel like now? Well, I want to feel prepared for this upcoming meeting. Okay. Imagine a time that I was prepared for an upcoming meeting and get into that state. So really controlling the sights, the sounds, the smells, the feelings, the physiology, and the words I tell myself to almost snap state exercises out of the way I was saying, like, I can control this. I can go and change my mood because I'm the one in control of it. And that's what I'll do. So no longer am I spending 2 hours of mental time. I'm like, yep, that happened. I recognize it, but this is the way I want to show up now. And that's where I will go and be like, all right, find that state and get to it.
Yeah. And I've always just done my best to position my physiology to where like I stay calm, but you will get into these triggering situations where you will be thrown off. And I mean, one of the greatest gifts you can ever give somebody is teaching them how to just be able to snap their fingers and change the mood. And that's the quality of your life, is the quality of your emotional experience.
Absolutely. Makes a world of a difference.
And then, you identified something you call mental time. Like,
hmm
it's just twice last week, I had a miscommunication with two different people, and they were relatively insignificant and they won't have any negative bearing or outcome. But, how much mental time was I thinking about that, stressing about that, internalizing that in my feelings? And that's a lot of mental time. And I like to create conditions in my life where like I don't have those stressful scenarios as much as I try to, because it does consume us, even though it doesn't take up time. I'm trying to hang out with my son and I'm actually worried about that thing.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So when you consider like time, don't just think about the physical time, but think about the mental time you spend on something. And honestly, sometimes it is good to have longer mental time. If you have a joyous interaction, then that mental time connection. So then you have joy from that experience that extends beyond that 30-minute interaction or that 1 hour interaction. So it goes both ways.
It's almost like when you plan a trip, just thinking about the anticipation of the trip is like so much fun, like as much fun as the actual trip.
Exactly. And it goes back to mental time and it goes back to the state. You're controlling the state of joy and excitement from planning that trip. And then you're going to go and actually experience the joy and excitement. So you've almost doubled the amount of joy and excitement you can have.
Yeah, yeah. So being able to turn that on, that off, being aware of that, and then having a choice.
Exactly.
All right. So with the clients you've worked with, what are some of the common limiting beliefs that are holding them back?
It's actually a word that is holding the most people back. Should. Anytime I meet with clients, I tell them, why do you use should? Should causes the most amount of stress in people's lives. And when they go and remove that, or I say, okay, use a different word than should. Either I won't, I want, or I can't. If you won't, then don't do it. Then you have a choice. If you want, that's something you want to do. It's no longer a should. You want to. And I can't might be a physical limitation, a time limitation, or something like that. Then it's no longer I should. Shoulds are things that the external world forces on us. And it adds a lot of stress to people's lives because then you work on other people's or external expectations rather than your own. So I kind of had two. I know you asked for one. The other one is just like the concept that stress is just a part of my life. That is true to a degree. There's two types of stress. There's eustress and de-stress. De-stress is the things that gives us anxiety, panic, and make us worry. Eustress is the things that actually improve us. So DadBods, for example, when you do your exercise in the morning, that's eustress. That is stress that's improving the individual and improving their lives. That's a good types of stress. Then there's de-stress, which is like worrying about a meeting in the future that you can't change until the meeting comes to fruition. That's de-stress. So stress is can be a part of your life, but when people assume that just constant stress is a part of their life, that's the misconception I think a lot of people have. It's stressful because you're letting it be stressful.
I think, I'm thinking of one person in particular that would say, that's just the way it is. Like that's just how it works. Like, it's stressful. That's just part of the game. That's just what I've accepted as my life. And there's no belief that the outcomes could still be achieved without the stress and without those adjustments. Gosh, to paint a picture of that and then to get somebody to shift or to give them an experience about that. Like, how can we start when there's just a lot of resistance there? Mm.
I think the biggest thing is to be like the control the controllables. That's the one thing I really like to focus on. It's like, can you control the situation to make it less stressful? And then if you can, take action. If you can take action, you can decrease your amount of stress because stress often comes from the lack of control.
Mm.
When we can't control something, we get stressed. So the other part of it, if you can't control it, don't worry about it.
Mm.
So it's the shift from worry and anxiety to control the controllables. If you can't control it, it's out of your hands. Don't worry about it. So it's a big shift to try and say, and I know it's easy for me to say, but I've been through it. So trust me, don't worry about the things you can't control because it doesn't do you any good either now or in the future. If anything, you're suffering through it twice, once now and once in the future.
Yeah, that reminds me of something in my personal relationship that I won't get into. Moving on. What comes to mind when I say what's the best advice you've ever received?
Best advice I've ever received is fall down 7 times and get up 8 and keep going. The idea behind this is like we learn the most when we fall down, but if you don't get back up from falling down, you're not going to progress. And that's probably one of the biggest things. I've learned so many things from starting my own business, going through extreme stress and burnout, but I fell down, evaluated, and then I got back up. The part of that also came from, I think he was the coach of the Lakers. I cannot remember his name, but he took the same one as like not only just fall down, but he sits there for a moment, he evaluates what went wrong before he gets back up. That way he can be better and improve the next time around. But that's probably the biggest one. Fall down 7 times and get up 8.
Yeah. And don't just get up and do the same thing. Like reflect,
Hmm.
make adjust,
Yes,
fall down, reflect, get up.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, reflect, take the time. Don't take too much time because sometimes you get a little lazy. You don't want to get back up.
Yeah, and I think, people are, if you lose 100 times, but you win 3 times, like if those 3 wins are big, it's worth 100 losses. And I just don't think people recognize that, like the history and the track record of a champion and of a winner behind them is a bunch of failure, a ton of more than you'd ever expect. And I just don't think people understand that, like, people don't just walk through life winning. Like, they're winning as a product of them losing a lot and learning a lot.
Hmm. Good example of that is Edison when he was making, I think it was a light bulb. Um, I think I'm sure many people hold this, but I'm going to say it anyway. It's the idea that he was in a lab and they were working on a light bulb, and it exploded. And the his assistant came in like, "What are you doing? You're getting, you keep failing and failing and failing. Why do you keep doing this?" Like, no, I'm not failing. I just found out 999 ways to not make a light bulb. And that's the idea is like, it's not a failure. You're learning from each one. But if you never start, you'll never learn.
Yeah, yeah. I'm a big fan of that quote. I like that one a lot. Mm. I haven't failed. I just found all the right ways it doesn't work.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. All the right ways it doesn't work. Yeah. I always get that quote wrong. But yeah, it's the concept that if you learn by doing, and if you don't do, you'll never learn. Now, true, you can learn from other people, but for the most part, you still got to try it yourself.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. When I ask what comes to mind when I ask what's the worst advice you've ever received? Or is there a traditional belief, something we were taught in school, just off your experience, worst advice you've ever received?
Worst advice. Hmm. That one's a little bit tough. Worst advice I've ever received. Probably that people are who they are and they will never change. It's this whole fixed mindset. And I didn't even know what it was in the past until I think I read Brienne Brown's, I think I got her name right, book on the fixed versus growth mindset. And a lot of people are stuck in this fixed mindset, like your genetics, the way you were raised, it's always going to be who you are. And that's probably the worst advice I've ever heard is like, you can't change. It's like, there's proof in the pudding that people can change. But it took me a long time to really get out of my own way to realize that. I think that's the same idea behind the stress. It's like people are always stressed. There's no way around that. Like, yeah, you just have to make the right choices.
Yeah. And I think sometimes here's something I've noticed about myself in the last year is that I've always, ran hard, kind of just going hard. I went through a burnout series in my mid to late 20s and just going so hard. And then like in the last year, I had a number of like extremely stressful things that were sort of in out of my control. And then they got resolved. But then I noticed my mind was like, I was still running this stress. And I was like, now I'm like looking for something to get stressed out about. And I had to really like recognize that and then go and practice some, relaxing, some yoga nidra, some meditation. And I had to like check my nervous system back into like, all right, you're not stressed out. Nothing stressful is going on. Reset here. But I think a lot of us in that environment are running on this. It's almost like an addiction to these stressful chemicals that
Mhm.
we almost have to detox from physically and just habitually in our mind.
Yeah, and that's what chronic stress can really do to people is they get stuck in that fight or flight mentality constantly. And it takes a massive reset to get out of that. I mean, for me, it took me a good number of years. One, a lot of it was through trial and error. Didn't really have like a guide, read some books and things like that, but a lot of it was just trial and error and getting me there. But it's that physical and mental reset of like the stress is gone. Don't have to keep looking for it. It doesn't have to be there. And that's a big deal.
Yeah, that's a big deal. Um, some, what are some unique habits or routines you've seen high performers adopt that others might find surprising?
There's actually one that I sometimes recommend to people actually is setting fake calendar invites on your calendar at the end of day. In different calendars, you can set things as private. So if you like have a corporate area, you can set things as private. So that way it goes back to choice. If you want to work a little longer, you want to help on something, you can choose to let the person go into your personal calendar invite. But it also gives you an easy way to say, hey, I've got something going on. I'm going to go do this. You don't have to tell somebody what it is. If you want to, you can. And who knows, other people might adopt it as well to truly get themselves a break point. This really comes as a big thing as well for people who work from home. Many people, they'll roll out of bed and they'll immediately start working. And then they will keep working because there's no transition point anymore where people were going into an office or where they were leaving an office and having to go do things. So having those calendar invites actually helps people not only like tell other people, hey, boundaries. I've got something I need to go do, but it also is a checkpoint to themselves like, oh, that's my reminder that my day is over.
And I kind of like the idea of like, look, I've got something scheduled, but since you're so important and this project is so important, I'm going to go ahead and make an adjustment here because this is a special situation. And then people feel like you're bending over backwards to
Mhm.
support whatever that is. It's almost like you get these like weird imaginary bonus points.
There you go. Yeah, and it is. It goes all back to the power of choice. You get to choose what you're using your time for.
Yeah. Um, in the corporate world, you see people living up to the expectations of their superiors. And some people live up to the expectations of their parents. Tell me about blood is thicker than water.
Yeah, so I actually saw this the other day. Is that a lot of people, and it's interesting, it comes up on like YouTubes and TikToks and other things like that, where people say, do you know the full words behind blood is thicker of water? The full words are the blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb. So it actually almost means the opposite of what people take it for. Often people say blood is thicker than water. You're supposed to be with, trust, and do whatever you can for your family. And that's true. It's a choice you can make if you want to. But actually what it is saying is that the blood of the covenant, like a group of people like that chose to be together, is thicker than the water of the womb being family ties, genetics, and relationships. Tying that back to the corporate world, there is this level of, and in the past, it was probably a lot stronger of like trust in the company, trust in the manager. I've got to go please the manager to make them do. It's like that is a choice. It's not a de facto, you have to. And I think a lot of people get stuck in this cycle of like, well, I need to prove myself. It's like, are you doing your job? Are you proving yourself to you and to the people who are important to you? Now, maybe your manager is important to them because you respect them and you have a good relationship with them and you want to make a good situation. That's different than saying, because they're my manager, I want to prove to them. It's a choice. It all goes back to choice and the power of choice.
Um, I want to get into, all right, so people are listening to this podcast, and some people are probably identifying with some of these problems. Now, they can go out and they can figure out how to solve these problems. They can listen to more podcasts like this and collect details and figure it out themselves. But I think a big hack in life is something called who, not how. So instead of going and listening to 1,000 podcasts and reading all of the books, I think it's best to identify someone who has already done what you're trying to do and go straight to them and get all the cliff notes and fast track your way there. This is a problem that you are the who, that is the specialist in solving it. So if somebody wants to just have a conversation with you to just get to know a bit more about your business and what you do, what does that process look like?
Yeah, absolutely. You can either go to my website and click on a free consultation. We'll set up 30 minutes to just talk through what you got going on, what I can do to help you. And sometimes I even just give you some ideas about, what your situation is and suggestions you can go and take to actually improve your situation. Also, shoot me an email, can do the same process to get connected and see what we can do to work through some of the things that you might have going on.
Yeah. And, passionate coaches generally like to give you an early win, and, stay in touch with you and just start a relationship. And, long term, if that's a good fit, then that's a good fit. And major transformation can happen. That's what we do at Performance Coach University.
There you go. Honestly, I'll have to say, looking back when I went through my burnout and my stress recovery on my own, that is something that I wish I had gone and looked for or pursued was either somebody who'd already been through it or like yeah, like a coach. Honestly, back then I had no concept of a coach, I'll admit. I wasn't even thinking about, I mean, I'd heard about like Bill Gates has a coach and Oprah Winfrey has a coach and Arnold Schwarzenegger has a coach and sports coaches. But I never thought, someone like me would need a coach. I wasn't like a multi-billion dollar person. But now, what I know now about coaching and who it serves and who it reaches and really the true benefits of it, I honestly wish I would have, it probably would have streamlined a lot of the stuff that I went through to have a coach and not spend years trying to get out of burnout.
Yeah, yeah. There you go. Um, all right. We could wrap it up now. I'm not sure what your time's like, or we could run through some fun questions. Do you have a few extra minutes, or should we wrap it up?
Maybe I think we can take a few more questions. I don't have an odd skill. I tried to think about this. I ain't got one.
All right. The rapid fire questions, right?
All right.
So let's just run through these and then we'll wrap it up. Um, so what pops in your head quick is what was your favorite food to eat when you were a kid?
Pizza.
Pizza, dude. Pizza's like the best. If you could have a drink or a fun hangout with anyone, dead or alive, who would it be?
Jim Rohn. I know he just recently passed away, but his content really spoke to me in terms of the biggest thing that hit me was like spend more time working on yourself than you do on your job. That
Oh,
was it was a huge impact to me and it really changed the way I thought about what I was doing in life.
where would you and Jim Rome go? Would y'all eat? What would y'all drink?
I'm not like a big drinker, so I'd probably take him out for coffee and go to like Panera. Go to Panera, get some like broccoli soup and a good sandwich and like coffee.
All right. Ra Rapid fire here. What is when I say the book that has influenced you the most all time?
Um, the book that has influenced me the most of all time.
Which one pops in your head first?
Um, the willpower instinct is the one that pops into my head. The concept that willpower is something you kind of control. I think that's what it's called. Is it willpower instinct? Yeah. Um, it just gave me a very different concept of willpower and how it's like your energy, and you need to be conscious about what you choose to spend it on. And how you refill it too. So that's why I spent a lot of time like focusing on like energy management rather than time management.
Yeah, I think yeah, I'm totally with you on that. All right, last rapid fire question. What is your favorite hype song?
It's My Life by Bon Jovi.
Oh, I've used that one. Oh, yeah. Back in college when we're about the same age, man. Back in college, I think that song came out. And
I like that one. That's it just like it just really speaks to me. It's like, yeah, it's your life. You cheat, do what you're gonna do with it.
I make the playlist for the guys every single morning. I'm playing half an hour of music, so like half my job being a freaking DJ. So that's one I could add to the list for sure.
Very nice. Very nice. It's a good song. Good song.
All right, Stephen, we're gonna wrap it up. Thank you so much. This was very, very interesting, very useful, and I'm looking forward to sharing it with all my corporate friends for sure. Any last words? We're gonna have all his links down in the show notes.
Last words is that remember you have a choice.
Remember, you have a choice in what's possible for you when you realize that. All right, that's it for today, guys. Thank y'all so much for listening. Have a great day. We'll see you next time.